Here. Commissioner Big Stick.
Here.
Okay, let's see. For a salute to the flag, Commissioner Berman, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Berman. All right, on to the approval of the agenda. All right, Commissioner Clifford.
I move that we approve the order of agenda.
Commissioner Rubenstein.
Second.
Got a motion and a second, please vote. Sorry. And that passes unanimously. All right. On to the approval of the minutes for the March 18th, 2019 meeting. Okay, Commissioner Neblin.
Move approval of the minutes.
Commissioner Kraske.
Second, that approval.
Okay, we've had a motion and a second. Please vote. All right, that passes unanimously. Onward to designation of liaison to the city council meeting. It doesn't appear there's a
And
need
I
for
think
one.
we will need one actually for April 8th. The ADU recommendation is going to city council.
Oh, okay. Who wants that experience? Anyone?
I'm happy to go.
You're happy to
Always
go?
excited about ADUs.
Excellent. Commissioner Neblin, you are it. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Much appreciated. All right. On to oral communications. This portion of the agenda is available to the public to address the Planning Commission on any issue within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission that is not on the agenda tonight. The time allowed for any speaker would be 3 minutes. If you want to speak on anything that's not on the agenda tonight, you'd fill out one of the cards in the back, bring it up to staff. I don't see movement. I don't see anyone looking like they're going to speak on something that's not on the agenda. I don't have any cards up here, so I'm going to close the oral communications and move on to consent items. We have 2 consent items. Yes.
So you guys can, the commission can act on them together without a presentation.
Okay. Let's see, Commissioner Neblin.
I would move approval of consent items 1 and 2.
All right, we've had a motion. Anyone want to make a second? Commissioner Clifford.
I'll second that.
We've had a motion and a second. Please vote. That passes unanimously. Okay, onward to a continued public hearing. The continued public hearing tonight deals with regulations to increase the maximum number of allowed marijuana retail operations in the Rockaway Beach and Sharp Park marijuana operation overlay districts, to amend regulations related to the testing and manufacturing operations, findings for approval of use permits, prioritizing certain lottery list applicants, cannabinoid extraction by manufacturers, parking standards for marijuana operations, and other administrative amendments to create efficiencies in the permitting process and conform with state law amendments. You guys couldn't do this in the last meeting? Come on. All right. Recommended CEQA action, exempt pursuant to CEQA guidelines, and to adopt the resolution initiating the amendment and recommending approval to City Council. Staff report, please.
Good evening, Commissioners. I am Associate Planner Bonnie O'Connor. During a public hearing on March 18th, I presented to the Planning Commission various amendments to the city's marijuana regulations to encourage retail operations, expand potential for cannabis manufacturing operations, and update the regulations to incorporate and maintain consistency with state law updates as a result of Senate Bill 94 and subsequent regulations based on direction received from the City Council. It was at this hearing that the Planning Commission directed staff to review a particular post-extraction refinement process, which includes the use of ethanol, and provide some further flexibility to the Planning Commission regarding the parking requirements for cannabis operations. After the hearing, staff researched the ethanol-based refinement process and determined that amendments to allow this activity would be feasible. The amendments made to the regulations include the addition of a number of definitions to define this post-extraction refinement process and to limit the activities allowed under this refinement process to winterization, clarification, and solvent recovery. These amendments also limit the maximum allowed amount of ethanol on site to 30 gallons, requires that ethanol be used in a closed-loop system, and requires that ethanol is stored in a fireproof cabinet when not in use. It is staff's opinion that allowing this specific ethanol-based refinement process in the limited manner described broadens the production ability of manufacturers and expands the competitive economic abilities of manufacturers without compromising substantial public health safety concerns associated with solvent-based extraction methods. The building official and the deputy fire chief have reviewed and provided input on these amendments. A late revision to the proposed language was requested by Deputy Fire Chief Lauderdale. This revision is shown on the sheet provided to Planning Commission at this meeting and is also available in the rear of the room for the public. On packet page 133, the last two sentences in section 9-4.4803, subsection D, subsection 3, Roman numeral 4, are proposed to read, all ethanol shall be kept in a fireproof cabinet when not being used, and facilities shall meet all applicable fire code requirements. The ethanol-based refinement process shall be designed and implemented to recapture and reuse ethanol. Staff is requesting the language be revised to read, all ethanol shall be kept in a fireproof cabinet when not being used. Cannabis manufacturing operations shall meet all California Fire Code requirements and applicable fire safety standards as determined by the fire marshal. The ethanol-based refinement process shall be designed and implemented to recapture and reuse ethanol. Staff asks that the Planning Commission include this amendment in a motion for approval, and staff can provide assistance with the wording for the motion if needed. In addition to the amendment for the refinement process, staff incorporated changes to the parking requirements based on feedback from Planning Commission. The proposed parking standard now allows the Planning Commission to require additional parking spaces for cannabis operations based on unique needs of the operation. As mentioned in the staff report, these amendments are intended to supplement the amendments already presented to the Planning Commission at the March 18th Planning Commission hearing. Staff received only one public comment letter in advance of tonight's meeting. Copies of this letter were provided to the Planning Commission and are also available in the rear of the room for the public. City staff, Police Chief Steidel, as well as our cannabis policy consultant Tim Cromartie from HDL are here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I had a quick question. So I watched the meeting. Thank you all for proceeding on that one. And I was interested when this came up. This seems, the ethanol provision seemed something that runs a little far afield for a planning commission to be tackling. Is that something that we would normally be looking at, a kind of a health and safety type of regulation?
I'm not intending for the Planning Commission to really look in the health and safety and review fire code requirements. The zoning amendment is intended to really establish boundaries for particular uses.
So is this going to get a look? The fire marshal took a look at it, but is this going to also be run through? I don't know who else this would run through. This would run through the state, Cal EPA, DTSC.
Yeah, applicants would have to get state licenses through the California Department of Public Health, as well as obtain building permits, which are reviewed for meeting fire code, as well as building code.
So this is just the beginning of the process. Okay. Commissioner Neblin, thank you.
Thank you. It's both, I guess, both a comment and a question. I guess the comment is that I know that this came up, the specific issue with respect to ethanol, because a member of the public, a couple members of the public had raised it as a concern or an idea in terms of making the ordinance somewhat more business-friendly, I guess was the idea. And it sort of was reflective of a particular process that they wanted to perhaps employ, subject to the various approvals they need to get in order to do it. And I guess my question is, were they involved at all, the commenters in particular, in terms of the work that's happened over the last couple of weeks, at least in checking in and seeing whether or not this is going to address what they're trying to accomplish?
They were. We followed up with them after the meeting. They provided us with some educational materials with what they were intending to or would hope to be able to accomplish, and they also provided a written description of what their process would be. So staff took that into consideration when drafting these amendments.
And I want to thank staff for sort of putting in terms that I could relatively easily grasp what it is that's going on here and sort of what the technology is supposed to do. So I appreciate your work on it.
Commissioner Clifford.
I see that it looks to me like we have a representative from the fire department. I had a couple of questions I'd like to ask them if possible.
Good evening. I'm Shane Lauderdale, Deputy Fire Chief with North County Fire Authority.
Thank you for being here. My question revolves around, I know we have an annual business inspection, fire inspection. Would this fall under that in terms of, is it an annual inspection for the ethanols being safe? Or would it be, would the inspections be more frequent?
First of all, I would anticipate it would be at least annual. As was described earlier, this would be just the first process, first stage in approving a process. That's why the language was so carefully looked at, so that as a person or entity comes into the community and starts to suggest how they would like to do something, then we would evaluate that with the fire codes and building codes and collaborate to ensure that we address all the safety standards. So the 30 gallons of ethanol is a very low threshold, and so it gives us some comfort that we'll be able to find those solutions.
Thank you so much for that.
Okay, I don't see any more questions for staff, so at this point, is this something that the city's just raising? Yeah.
This was city generated.
Yeah, city generated? Okay. Well, at this point, I'm going to open up for public comment. Unless, this city wants to say anything else at this point. No. Okay. I have one card. Adam Zollinger.
How's it going? My name's Adam Zollinger. I apologize, I'm a little under the weather today. I'm one of the applicants next in line for a third permit in Sharp Park. I wanted to thank everybody for the hard work I know it took to get the text amendment up and have everybody working on that and getting it ready for passing. Hopefully tonight there's no issues with the passing of this. The manufacturing thing is what held up the retail last week, and I was hoping one of the minutes from a prior meeting, council requested that manufacturing didn't hold up any of the retail stuff. So hopefully tonight this will get passed through and we can begin working together and getting some much needed tax revenue for the city. But yeah, once again, thank everybody for the hard work it took to get all this done. So thank you.
Okay, that is the only card I have for public comment. So I am going to close the public comment and bring it back to the commission for deliberation. Commissioner Nevlin.
Well, absent any further interest, I'm ready to make a motion. Interest is the wrong word, further discussion. I know there's a lot of interest in the matter.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get in the way of your motion. I have a feeling I'm going to be outgunned on this, but having looked at the text amendments and looked at the last meeting, I just think I'm not in favor of so many of the change to this many cannabis businesses in the overlay districts. So I'm going to be probably voting no, but.
Okay. Well, I'm prepared to move that the Planning Commission find the proposed ordinance is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, that it adopt the resolution included as attachment A to the staff report to initiate the text amendment, and recommend approval to the City Council incorporating the additional change to Pacifica Municipal Code Section 9-4.4803D3 Romanet 4, as shown in the, as quoted by staff earlier today, and as we have here with us, and incorporate all maps and testimony into the record by reference.
Okay, we've had a motion and a second. Commissioner Bigstick.
I will second.
All right. No one else? I saw another light. Okay. We had a motion second. Please vote. Okay, that passes 4-3. And we will move on. Thank you, Police Chief Steidel, for showing up. Okay. Onward to site development permit PSD 811516. This is for a parking exception for demolition of an existing one-story, 2,992 square foot commercial building and construction and operation of a new three-story, 18,000 square foot, 31-room hotel with a freestanding sign at 699 Oceana Boulevard. The recommended CEQA action tonight is a Class 32 categorical exemption, and the recommended action is also to approve as conditioned. Staff report, please.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Senior Planner Christian Murdoch. Staff has received one public comment letter on this project prior to the public hearing, which was included as Attachment E, packet page 311, in the report for this item. Also related to public involvement in the project, the staff report notes that the city hosted an informational session on the project in January of 2019, which was attended by several interested residents living in the area, and in which the applicant presented the project and answered neighbor questions. Following the meeting, the applicant made some revisions to the plans and included new details in the plans to respond to concerns identified by certain neighbors. To staff's knowledge, the applicant has also continued a dialogue since the session with one or more neighbors to ensure they are informed about the project. The item before you relates to the proposed demolition of an existing vacant restaurant building and construction of a new three-story, 31-room motel with approximately 18,000 square feet of floor area. The project would consist of a single building with surface parking and driveways surrounding the building. The project would also include grading of portions of the site to expand the existing building pad area to allow construction of the project as proposed. The project would include two driveways from Oceana Boulevard, one a dedicated one-way driveway for arriving guests to conveniently access the lobby, and another driveway to the north with two-way traffic for guest use after check-in. The project would limit guest rooms entirely to the second and third floors. The project would include 15 guest rooms on the second floor and 16 guest rooms on the third floor. The ground floor would be reserved for lobby, reception, computer room, juice bar, and other guest service uses, including a small dining area for guest use only. At the second floor on the front of the building, the project would include a garden terrace atop the canopy, which provides covered parking for arriving guests at ground floor. Many guest rooms will include balconies, but none of the guest rooms along the rear of the proposed building would include balconies in order to minimize the potential for noise and privacy impacts to adjacent single-family residences along Edgemar Avenue. To further enhance privacy of these residences, the rooms on the rear of the building will include awnings that limit views upward to the residential properties. The project as conditioned would meet all zoning standards except the proportion of compact parking spaces as explained in the staff report. Regarding zoning compliance, in response to staff comments, the applicant submitted final revisions to the proposed plans immediately before publication of the agenda packet, which did not afford staff time to update the report to reflect the following. The applicant revised the dimensions of compact parking space number 12 to ensure it is a compliant full-sized parking space. Thus, the proposed condition of approval number 23 requiring relocation of this space should be deleted. Because of the revisions to compact parking space number 12, the project now includes only 18 compact parking spaces, or 55% of spaces on site as compared to 58% stated in the staff report. Proposed condition of approval number 22, limiting the project to 19 compact parking spaces, should be revised to reflect 18 compact parking spaces. The applicant included the locations of the required electric vehicle charging stations on the site plan, thus the first sentence of proposed condition of approval number 24 should be deleted. And the applicant included the required bicycle parking located at the front of the proposed building. Therefore, the first sentence of proposed condition of approval number 25 should be deleted. And I know that was a lot, so I'll be happy to reflect on that if appropriate at some later point in tonight's hearing. Specifically pertaining to compact parking spaces, the applicant has requested a parking exception. Staff's analysis in the staff report supports a recommendation to grant the parking exception. If granted, the project would provide one more off-street parking space than required by the zoning regulations. Staff also evaluated potential environmental impacts associated with the proposed project as required by the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. Staff's conclusion was that the project qualifies for a Class 32 infill development exemption pursuant to Section 15332 of the CEQA guidelines, which means the project would not have any significant environmental impacts. The analysis to support this categorical exemption is contained in the staff report and the project file, including but not limited to the technical studies prepared to justify that the project will not have significant effects related to traffic, noise, air quality, and water quality. In sum, the project as conditioned would comply with applicable requirements of the Pacifica Municipal Code upon granting of the requested permits and could be conducted safely without any adverse impacts on the environment or on the public health, safety, and welfare of the surrounding community. For these reasons, staff recommends approval of the project and adoption of the draft resolution attached to the staff report. That concludes my presentation, and staff, including the police chief and engineering staff, is available to answer any questions from the commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Big Stick.
Yeah, so the parking space was made bigger to be a regular parking space. Is that the same number of parking spaces then overall?
Correct.
And then I know that when a relative comes to visit, sometimes I'll visit them in their hotel room, which means I'll also need a parking space upon arrival. That would be a bit far for me to walk in a timely fashion. So my question is, was there any thought taken into account for people visiting guests? Was there any thought that maybe there should be even more parking crammed in there, or specifically on-street parking? And I noticed that the on-street parking, I think about 3 spaces were thought to be taken out so that when leaving the driveway, you don't inadvertently crash your car into oncoming traffic, which I think is overall a great idea. But I want to make sure that there's also enough parking available for visitors of guests. Was that taken into account? And if so, were there any conclusions?
Sure. So we evaluated the proposed project against the parking requirements in the municipal code. And so on that basis, the project as proposed would provide 1 more space than required by the zoning. We anticipate, as is the case with many hotels, that they don't operate at full occupancy. And so with that in mind, the number of spaces provided would be for less than the full number of rooms, if you follow that logic. And so we believe that the parking that's been required by the code and provided in excess by the applicant should be sufficient for this project. The staff has not identified anything unique to this project to require additional parking beyond the zoning requirement.
Okay, and just to be clear, there won't be like a permit required from the hotel to be able to park in their parking lot?
The applicant has not proposed any such permit parking requirement. It may be appropriate to ask the applicant if he has that information about the operator.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Clifford.
Before we go any further, I want to acknowledge that of the 9 team members that put this project together, I have worked with 4 of them. I have no interest in this project, and I'm certain that I can render unbiased opinions on it.
Thank you. Commissioner Neblin.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions in for staff, and I think I understood it in the packet and from the presentation, but there isn't any bar service proposed for this hotel?
There's been no alcohol service described in the materials submitted to staff. If that's of concern, we could discuss adding a condition that explicitly states that.
Well, I'm particularly interested in any services, whether they be food, banquet, bar, whatever, that might cater to non-guests. Just because I think that could have some impacts that we'd really want to think about if that were part of the plan.
Of course, and agreed. I think the applicant can probably articulate more fully the type of operation proposed. There's been nothing in the materials submitted to staff that would suggest that it's designed for non-guest customers. So the breakfast service and the juice bar, for example, have been described to the city as being for the guests and an amenity for them only, not for off-site customers to come and stop at the hotel.
Okay. Well, maybe we can hope that the presentation will touch on that. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any more questions for staff, so actually let's bring the applicant up here. You'll have 10 minutes to present your project.
Thank you, Chair. And we'll just need a moment to jockey the
Sure.
slides.
Good evening, Commissioners, members of the staff, and the public. My name is Patrick Mora, architect. I'm representing Sam Devdara, the owner, who is here tonight to answer any questions about the operations of the hotel. And I also have the traffic engineer and the source engineer, and I have Brian Gutter, the landscape architect. So any questions, they're available to answer. This project has been in the works for many years, and we have gone through many changes, all with regards to parking, landscaping, retaining walls, comments from the adjacent neighbors, land use, air quality, lighting, height, water, drainage, erosion. All these issues have been worked with. And most of the questions that came up from the neighbors, we have tried to address. Specifically, the owners of the property in the back, 624 H-Mart, with whom we met, and we verified that the elevation of their house, this is the surveyor did this, verified the elevation of their house was at a certain location where their view was impaired or not impaired. And so all these issues were addressed. And ultimately, there's a letter that we received from the Connemara neighbors, and we try hard to correlate their concerns with the staff report. And, they talk about all these worries they have, children and traffic, the trails going up to Milagro Ridge. And I tried to find an answer to these concerns because we want to work positively with all of them. And there was not one specific comment or anything written by an expert that could confirm that these concerns were 100% valid. I would love to get together with them and work further to mitigate some of their concerns. But in essence, all these comments are, although they're very valid, everybody has the right to worry about their children, and specifically around public buildings. But we are willing to work with them if that's the case, the same way we did with the neighbors in the back of 624 H-Mart. And I'm going to ask Ceci here to help me point to the. We're going to show you a few graphics. We work hard on this building to make it simple and easy to maintain and to stay away from property lines as much as possible, and to provide parking in a setting that is quiet. It'll be surrounded by a wall that is a vegetated wall. It's a new system in the market that, you've seen the vertical green walls. Where we're using one of those at an angle, set back midway, so that it doesn't, the effect is not that great. The pictures there show the existing site. And the site is just, very sad. Everything has been happening there. So the sooner we get rid of this building existing, the better for the neighborhood. I remember going there to this coffee shop with my children for breakfast on Sundays. And it was very, it was exciting for the kids, but it was decaying little by little. And eventually they closed, and it's been like that for years. So we've been looking forward to replace it with something decent and something that can provide some amenity to the community and that produce some income to the city. Next. This drawing shows the impact of the cut into the hill, and also the vegetation that will be partly removed, and the biology. Even though there's no impact, biological impact, we wanted to show what the existing building on the left looks like in terms of footprint, and on the right you see the new building. A circulation plan that was requested by planning shows the accessibility for ADA and the parking and the EV charging stations in the back and the bicycles in the front and the vegetation and the walls. The floor plan on the ground floor shows the lobby, a big atrium with a skylight, large skylight on top to be lighted area. There'll be a breakfast area, and one of the persons tonight asked me if the breakfast would be big enough to come and have breakfast on Sunday. So I said perhaps it will, to replace the old breakfast place that we had there before. The manager's station is on the apartment is on the right, and there's an elevator and some computers area. There's another floor plan, shows that's a second floor plan. We have a open to below area in front and in the middle to animate a space full of light and to show a view of the ocean through that glass wall in front. This is the third floor. We have a common space in the front. It can be used for anything, yoga or anything. The landscape has been going through several variations, and Brian Gatter, the landscape architect, is here tonight. He can explain better what we can use on the vegetative wall that we are proposing. But essentially, the retaining walls are vegetated, and there'll be rosemary hanging over and other nice plants. Brian is an expert. He has plenty of experience with parks in the city, and I think he's done a great job. The balconies have a special railing detail to animate the facade and to put some color. It also shows, this elevation shows the two signs, one on the left on the face of the building, and the other one is a monument on a wall towards the right. This is the artwork that was designed by an artist up in Washington State. She explained that the colors on the left are the resemblance of the ocean during the daytime, and the ones on the right will be at nighttime. The colors on the graphics here shown are not that sharp, so we apologize for that. But I think it'd be a very interesting play of light when the wall is up and the sun is in the afternoon is hitting the wall. Again, this is the elevation showing the walls, and the rear elevation shows the awnings that were suggested by Isabel and Nick Matthews that live at 624 Edgemar, and this is to prevent sights or views from the guests in the hotel to other neighbors. Those are the two elevations on the side. And a section showing the small detail up on top. I apologize for the size, but we try to incorporate some kind of a seating area in front of the building so that it has perhaps access to a bus or to transportation. This drawing shows the sight lines from Isabel and Nick's house in the back, and to show what portion of their view will be blocked by the building, top of the building only, not the entire mass of the building, but just the top, because they are elevated much higher. And this is the wall that we're proposing with vegetation coming through the blocks and the pavable grass pavers on the bottom. I think, yes, I think we've shown you most of the drawings. I know you have a set of drawings. And I'll be glad to call the consultants to answer any questions or to answer any questions that you have for me. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's see if we have any questions for you right now. Okay, looks like we do. All right, we're going to start off with Commissioner Clifford.
Okay, could we go back to the cross-section of the living retaining wall?
Sure. The vegetative wall. Yes.
Okay. On this, I have never worked with anything like this, so I would like a little more detail in how it works in terms of making sure that this area, once you've excavated it, is sound and safe. I don't know if you can do that or if your soils engineer can do that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, we can do that. Thank you.
A little more in-depth on that one.
Thank you, Commissioner Niblin.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up the question, the question I had for staff about sort of the business plan, I guess, as it pertains to some of the potential operations, including sort of the juice bar, the meal, the breakfast area. You actually kind of made an oblique reference to it. I'm not sure I totally understood what you were saying. Curious about the extent to which non-guests are going to be able to access those things, or whether you have any plans for any particular, or whether the operator has any plans for any particular services are going to be available for folks who aren't guests. So I'd like that spoken to.
Sure. I can call the owner to give us an idea of the operations.
Sure.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Sam Devidra. I'm one of the owner of the site. 31-room hotel. It's a limited service hotel. There is no proposed food or beverage services. So there will be a breakfast served, but that would be for the hotel guest only. So all services that we'll provide will be limited to the hotel guests only.
Okay, and I saw the conference room as well. Is that's not going to be used for conferences involving non-guests?
So there'll be a meeting space available for whoever wants to come and rent a meeting space, but there's no food services there.
Okay. How many folks would that conference room accommodate, do you suppose?
I'm sorry, I don't have a current square footage with me, but
15 people, 20 people.
it's like a boardroom, basically.
Okay, and the reason I ask, I'd be concerned about sort of the parking capacity and sort of the potential trip generation capacity of something like that when added to the guests. So
Sure,
something for us
yeah.
to think about.
Appreciate that. Just from the parking standpoint, and this is strictly just from the operation side, I do operate other hotels as well, and in a recent environment, even with 31 rooms hotel, from the operational side, if I have 20 parking, that would be sufficient to run the 31 rooms hotel. Not every guest, even hotels full with 31 units, not every guest will bring a car. They do use means of other transportation. So just from the operational side, 31 is a pretty, decent-sized parking space for that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, Commissioner Bigstick.
Sure, and dovetailing off the parking question, will there be any permitting system for parking in place? Or can anyone just drive up and park?
It will be a hotel guest parking only, so they will have use some sort of service just to identify their vehicle that it's a hotel guest vehicle.
Sure, so anyone who might be visiting a guest will not be allowed to park in that parking lot?
No, as long as they check in with the front desk. So there'll be some sort of system in place that we'll
like
utilize.
One might say a casual permitting process.
Yes.
Cool. And then I had a different question. You had mentioned 624 Edgemar earlier. I was just wondering if there was any follow-up from the people at the residence, if they were satisfied with everything you did, or if there was any further feedback from them.
Mrs. Matthews, of course, didn't like the idea of being blocked entirely from her view. But I show her with the arrows, the corridors that she has, because you're far away from the building. The further you are, the building shrinks in form, and then the more you can see. Of course, if you have it in front of you, it becomes more obtrusive. So I think My feeling is that she was okay with it, but she's here tonight, and we can ask her that again.
Thank you very much.
All right, Commissioner, are you done?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Clifford.
Okay, one question in terms of the breakfast. It's been said breakfast. Is this the traditional full breakfast, or is this the hotel continental breakfast that's being offered?
I have not made arrangements to put a hood yet, because these are preliminary drawings, but when construction documents come and we can put a shaft and somebody can be frying eggs or doing other things, so we can have a proper exhaust, and I guarantee it'll be a better breakfast. Yeah.
I was just asking in terms of people wanting to have guests wanting to have outside people come and have breakfast with them versus the continental breakfast, which you get up, you grab a roll or whatever and take it back to your room. So that was the direction of my question.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner. So this will be a hotel guest-only breakfast. We're not there yet in terms of what the setup would be, but it's more like what you just mentioned, more like a continental breakfast that serves hotel guest only. If we allow outside persons to come in and have breakfast, that would be a food service sort of requirement. So right now, we're not proposing any food service at all.
Thank you for that. And I did want to get an actual chance to talk to either the soils engineer or the structural engineer about the retaining wall. My earlier question just sort of disappeared. So if either of those gentlemen are available, I'd like to have a little more information on the retaining walls, because they're new to me.
So, Mike O'Connell, I'm the civil consultant for the project, neither the soils engineer or the structural engineer, but I do know a lot about these walls. They're really common. We've designed and built them up to 30 and 40 feet before. We did some 25-foot walls recently in San Jose on a landfill with pretty terrible soil conditions, so they're really stable. The technical term is mechanically stabilized earth walls, and so they have a kind of a very wide structural footprint, if you will, with reinforced geogrids. So, yeah, very safe, totally feasible.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I just needed a little explanation, and I appreciate it.
Commissioner Berman.
I have a few miscellaneous questions. To start, back to the parking. I know it was mentioned that one stall will be dedicated to the manager of the hotel at the time. I'm wondering if additional employees are anticipated, cleaning staff and whatnot, for the operation, and where they would park. Is it anticipated that they would park on the street? I know that that particular area does have open street parking, but I'd like to better understand how many employees might be working at one time if the operation is known.
Again, from the operation standpoint, as you typically know, if the hotel is 80% occupied, about 75 to 80% of those guests would show up after 5, 6 o'clock to the hotel for check-in. Usual hotel check-in time is 2 o'clock. Housekeeping staff who's there, they're there in the morning time. During the entire day on the front desk, we expect on a 31 room, one front desk person with a manager on duty, probably 9 to 5. We don't expect to have more than a couple of vehicles from employee during the peak hours.
And was that considered in the TIA, the traffic study?
Let me call the traffic engineer to address that question, please.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Cameron Chu. I'm with DKS Associates Incorporated, traffic engineering firm. We didn't prepare the original traffic impact study, which was done by RKH, Civil and Transportation Engineering. We were hired to conduct a peer review based on the direction of the city to make sure that the applicant's traffic study conform with the typically used practices in the traffic engineering profession. So what the applicant did regarding the parking, the applicant, in addition to meeting the zoning code requirements, the applicant consulted parking generation manual published by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. Based on a 32-room motel in the traffic impact study, the 85th percentile parking demand was found to be 28 spaces. So in traffic engineering, we typically go off of the 85th percentile rule, meaning that you don't design your roadways to serve Black Friday traffic for just a few times out of the year. You generally want to design about an 85th percentile case, which was 28 spaces in this case. So the proposed parking, as mentioned, would meet the 85th percentile demand on most days. Yeah, so that would account for the property manager, whoever's working the desk, and the cleaning staff.
Thank you. A few more questions, not necessarily related to parking. I think there was mention of a possible bench at the front of the hotel. Kind of wondering where the nearby bus stop is, if there is one, and also if there will be lighting at night to kind of turn away unwanted overnight guests on the bench, potentially. So nighttime parking for safety reasons mainly.
Yeah, that's a good comment. The lighting is always an issue, especially when it's outdoors. As a rule, we try to not direct any lighting away from what the subject is. But the drawings are preliminary. We have done the best we can to present it to you. But I think when we go to the construction documents, planning will review the drawings again, and we will make sure that everything is done correctly. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Last question. The existing landscape area at the top of the slope that's anticipated to remain, wondering if there's any opportunity to enhance the planting there for the residents behind the property. I know that they'll be overlooking the property. It might be an opportunity to plant that area for more aesthetics.
Sure. Let me call Brian Gatter, our architect, landscape architect. Brian?
Sure, real quick.
Sure.
Yeah, hi, good evening. I'm Brian Gatter. I'm a landscape architect working with Patrick on this. Certainly, there are plantings in the plans now on top of the wall in those back areas, and we could certainly look at enhancing that even further if there was a desire by the neighbors to do that. It's certainly easy to do.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Okay, I'm going to jump in with a question. What type of clientele do you anticipate staying at the hotel?
It's a more boutique hotel, and we expect both leisure and corporate travelers to come and stay there who doesn't want to be in San Francisco downtown with traffic and whatnot. I mean, Pacifica is very underserved in terms of hotels, from the operation standpoint, a financial standpoint.
Okay,
so
thank you.
I'm sure you all have occupancy reports from this town, what the hotels are doing, and that can tell you the story of why is it underserved.
Thank you. Follow-up question. You mentioned that you operate some other hotels. Is there anything, anyone's in the area, in the vicinity that we'd know?
We do own several hotels in San Francisco. Other than San Francisco, I have hotels in Marina near Monterey, also in Sebastopol, El Dorado Hills in the town center. I have a hotel at Union Square in San Francisco.
Okay.
So I do have several other hotel operations.
All right. Which hotel in Union Square? I'm just curious.
It's a Holiday Inn Express.
Thank you. Okay. Let's see, Commissioner Kraske, was that your light, or am I getting that wrong? Okay.
I was just wondering if you had considered the building materials being used for this hotel, given the harsh kind of climate here in Pacifica. Did you choose the building materials to be compatible to this climate here? In terms of, I see you have some awnings that you were planning on implementing and some bronze metal trim. Have you considered those building materials? And
most of the materials that we're using are easy to maintain and durable. Like concrete will be smooth, so any metal that is mixed in the concrete, usually it will show a little rust. But in this case, it will be smooth and sealed, so it will preserve that phase of the concrete. All the metal will be anodized or stainless, and that's for the window frames and all that. And the rest is wood. It's just a regular, durable redwood.
and the awnings, they're like
The awnings will be, we're proposing some kind of a canvas with a durable finish on an aluminum frame. Yeah, something light.
Okay, I don't have any more questions for you at the moment. Don't go far. We may at the, well, you'll have a chance to speak at the end of public comment, in response to public comment. So at this point, I do want to open this up to the public comment. Anyone who wishes to comment could fill out a card in the back. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Hand the card up to staff. I have quite a few cards already, and I will start reading off the names. We're going to start off with Janine Menger, followed by D. Gold.
Good evening, Planning Commission. Thank you for having me. My name is Janine Menger. I'm at 804 Edgemar, so this is in my backyard. I tend to come here in favor of this project because losing Spanky's has created kind of a blight in my neighborhood, and I see this as being something that would be in favor of Pacifica in general. We have a lot of properties that need to be developed in this town, in my humble opinion, and I think that it's a gem waiting to be polished, this town. So I think this is an example of that. I have heard some rumblings in the back from my neighbors. I'm dying to hear what they have to say about too many motels or not enough motels or whatever. I haven't done enough research to know either way. I hope that this has been considered carefully when deciding on this project as to how many motels we do or don't currently have. Anyway, I want to see this be in favor of the city, particularly from a revenue point of view. And it's the one issue I want to bring up is about the intersection at Milagro and Oceana. I don't think it's going to create a huge problem at that intersection, the driving in there, because there's only a relatively small number of people relative to the number that came from Spanky's anyway back in the day when it was open. So I think it's maybe going to be a little bit more, but that intersection could stand to take a few more cars. It's kind of busy right now, but hopefully eventually there will be a stoplight put in there, particularly when it becomes a northbound entrance to Highway 1. So I hope that's being considered. I hope that was hysterical. I don't know what that was about. All right, anyway, to answer your question, Ms. Berman, there are bus stops right there at the corner, right by the Chevron station for 110 and a couple of other lines. 118. And 118. Okay, I've just been... That's mostly what I wanted to say. I also want to say something out of order. I'm putting an ADU over my garage. I want to see what your process is like for doing that. I hope it's good. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, D. Gold, followed by Blue Muron. No, I got that wrong.
Hi, I'm one of the people who is signed on to the letter from the Connemara neighbors, and I agree with the points that they make. I also am concerned that this becomes a justification for creating an on-ramp on Milagro. I received a notice of this hearing because I live within however many 100 feet of this project on Bruce Street. So again, it's in my backyard as well. I don't want a justification for, I don't want to build an on-ramp at Malagra. We went to the Planning Commission to oppose that project, so now if this becomes a justification for it, then that's yet another reason to oppose it. I'm concerned that they say, well, we designed for 85% capacity, but we know that hotels tend to run at high capacity and low capacity. And I don't think there's adequate parking that's been planned on this. I don't think that it comes within the height limits that are appropriate. And in general, and I know that that cannot be used for this project, but I just think this Planning Commission is going in the wrong direction. We need low-cost residential housing. If we have lots in this city to build on, we should be building public housing. We shouldn't be building, and this sounds like a particular, I have to say, crap hotel. The two-story hotel made of concrete and wood and metal with no real services. And I'm pretty familiar with the Holiday Inn Express in San Francisco. This doesn't sound like a particular addition to our city. I'm sorry, don't mean to say anything bad about this particular hotel owner, but I am familiar with that particular hotel. So I don't think this project should be approved. I don't think the exception to CEQA should be approved. I think this requires a lot more study and a lot more investigation, and we should get away from the hand-waving about the parking spaces and the height. Thank you.
All right, next up will be Blue Muron and then Julie Starobin.
Hi, I live on Manor Drive, so I'm pretty close to where this hotel is being planned. And it just looks to me like it belongs in an industrial park, not a mid-century residential neighborhood. I feel like we do have hotels in Pacifica to accommodate the tourists, and what we need is developers who are willing to build low-income and affordable housing. That's the real problem here. Thank you.
Next up is Julie Starobin and Victoria Becker.
Hi, I'm also opposed to this project. I don't feel like the developer has addressed the concerns of the neighborhood. I know there was a neighborhood meeting in January that I, living on Manor, never even heard about, where supposedly they talked about things. So I don't think the concerns were addressed. I think they just went ahead and the developer went away and did what they wanted. I'm very worried about parking. I feel like during the day, there is no parking available on Oceana. The dentist and the petting and the gas station and the kids walking to Oceana High School on that street or walking to Good Shepherd, it's not a very big street. And to have all that extra traffic going in and out of driveways on a two-lane road does not make sense to me. And you cannot widen, I wouldn't want to, but you can't widen Oceana Avenue. There's nowhere to go. So you have extra cars going in and out, and you know, they say the employees won't be there when the hotel guests are there, but that's ridiculous. You know they're going to be. House cleaning doesn't go away at 7 in the morning, and hotel guests don't go away at 8 in the morning. And they say there won't be, not everybody will have a car. Well, anybody, corporate or whatever, they're going to come to Pacifica, they're going to have a car because there's no bus service. And in that location, there's nowhere to walk to. You know, the hotel's in Rockaway, and on Francisco there, they have places to walk to, but not on Oceana Avenue, not at Oceana and Malagra. It's a residential neighborhood. And yes, tear down Sparky's, put something there, but don't build a hotel that will add all this extra traffic and people and cars and pollution from the parking and the cars. Thank you.
All right, next up is Victoria Becker, followed by Michael Velassi. Okay, now I got that wrong. But.
Hi, my name is Victoria Becker. I'm here from Pacifica Social Justice. I live 2 blocks away from the site on Bruce Street. in the midst of a statewide horrific housing crisis where teachers and seniors and veterans and working people can no longer afford to live in Pacifica. What is Pacifica doing about this crisis? Even though it is being constantly discussed on a statewide level, they're making a 31-bed hotel overlooking the freeway and the Chevron station. I find this absolutely outrageous. What Pacifica needs is low-income housing, affordable housing that's been talked about over and over again. There are state grants that are being proposed for such things. Pacifica has done nothing to look into this. Pacifica is always talking about hotels. Anyway, I am absolutely outraged beyond all the many things that are being talked about the impact on the neighborhood. I would put up with noise of construction and every other thing if it was actually making places for people to live. You are charged with figuring that out as the planning committee.
All right. Next up, apologies, Michael. Yeah, please say it for the record for our poor transcriber.
Sure.
Followed by, I'm having a rough night tonight. Anselo Debola Batoli. That's got that one wrong.
Good evening. My name is Michael Vitzali, and I live at 640 Edgemar, so this indeed is in my backyard as well. And I'm a person who, and my wife and I stand opposed to the project because we believe it's out of scale for that space. We think that, and agree with and have signed on to the Connemara letter that it's out of scale for the neighborhood, that space, though zoned commercially. And we're not opposed to every development, but since it is zoned for commercial purposes, a better fit might be what some of the examples that are already there on Oceana Boulevard, something like a dental office, things like that have normal business hours and won't have people coming and going all day and night. A hotel is a transient population. They have no investment or connection to our neighborhood, and it is indeed a neighborhood. I'm a high school teacher. This is the only place I have to go. I'm one of the people that is kind of an anchor in this community. I want to stay close to the place that I teach. There are indeed 4 schools nearby, as you guys know already. I wish I had heard about the previous January meeting. It seems like we're pretty far along and they've done a lot of work on the design. I wish I had heard about the neighborhood meeting. I didn't know about this until I got the letter about this meeting. But there's 4 schools, as you know, nearby. And I think that just looking at some of the exemptions that are being asked to, that are being applied for, I think tells us the story. If there's so many exemptions that are needed, it's not a fit for this place. And I just want to ask, and I'll release the rest of the time, but do any of you live next to a hotel? I'm just curious. And if you do, what's it like? I want to know. Does anybody live next to a hotel? Do the project planners and the architects live next to a hotel? You guys live next to a hotel? I would wonder. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up will be, and please state your name for the record, and thank you. And Lila Olivia.
Hi, my name is Dr. Omsalo DeBella Bichetti, and I live, I think, within the 500 feet of the proposed site. So I've signed 2 letters now in opposition, and so my thoughts that I'm going to share now are in addition to the content in those 2 letters. I think that we really can't understate the traffic congestion impact. I think that It's my understanding that the applicant's analysis was based on an outdated traffic study, and it sounds like what Mr. Cameron, I believe his name was Cameron Chu from the firm assigned to do a peer review of the traffic study, that to me doesn't suggest that they did their own analysis. It sounds like they analyzed old data. And I can tell you that from my experience living here for almost 2 years, that there's lots of congestion on that block of Oceana Boulevard on both sides of the hotel plan, in addition to lots of regular foot traffic from pedestrians, including children at the different schools. I also think that we can't understate that, in addition, sort of dovetailing with the comments about the housing shortage in Pacifica and generally in California and across the country, that there are over 300 Airbnb rooms available on in Pacifica, and I think that any hotel that's operating at less than, a desirable occupancy rate is not necessarily going to be a great investment and a great source of revenue that we all think it will be. If there's any way to acknowledge the fact that it sounds like, Holiday Inn Express is kind of like a 3-star, maybe 2-star establishment, and I can't imagine that that's going to be more desirable than some of the higher-end Airbnb rentals. And so, to my mind, why put a giant hotel here that's not going to be at 85% occupancy most days? I think that that's it's just a waste of space. I think that there are other services that could be considered within what this particular property is currently zoned for. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Next up, and if we can keep the clapping to a minimum because it's just eating up a lot of time. Next up would be Laylee Olivia, and then Christine Fagan.
Hi there, Laylee Oliva. I've lived in Pacifica now for 15 years. I initially lived in the Sharp Park neighborhood and moved to the Connemara neighborhood about 3 years ago. My first concern about the proposal here is primarily related to the traffic congestion and parking along the street, which you keep hearing over and over. But I can tell you in the 15 years I've lived here and gone up and down Oceana Boulevard 2-3 times a day, in the last 2 years, this traffic has exploded. I don't know if it's because of increased occupancy in Pacifica in general for homeowners or renters or people that actually need housing versus the Starbucks establishment, but something has changed. And my understanding is that the traffic assessment that was done was initially in 2015. My neighbor, Christine, who's speaking after me, has a lot more data on the objective concerns. But on another note, I have subjective concerns having 2 kids at Ocean Shore Elementary School, and the site itself is 0.3 miles from that school, as well as 0.3 miles from Good Shepherd, as well as the high school just a little bit further down the road. There are kids walking up and down these sidewalks all day long, not all day long, obviously, but school hours, and I'm concerned, not just about traffic, but there's just more people and congestion, and it's just as a mom and a physician, it's a concern that I have for general health, of public safety health issues as well. So, I agree that the site needs to be updated and renovated and turned into something. But hopefully, again, it could be either some type of small business or housing again. I know you guys have thoughts about housing for teachers back at the, blanking on the back of Pacifica spot there, but I'm thinking this spot is potentially perfect for something like that as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up is Christine Fagan, and then Mark Nicodemus.
Sorry. Hi, my name is Christine Fagan. I am a resident of the Connemara housing community, a little bit, not too far from here, a little bit up the hill. As previously stated, there was a previous letter delivered to the planning department, but I also have a new letter, opposition letter, that I'll be submitting at the end here, and has over 30 signatures more, and so I'm kind of speaking on their behalf too. So this was prepared after the planning staff released their staff report. This is a little bit long, so I'll try to just be more brief on the points. Okay, so this letter is to formally notify the planning department and the planning commission that the residents and of the Pacific Manor community, so it's beyond Connemara, we've got Pacific Manor, just residents all signing it to signature here and strongly object and unconditionally disapprove the proposal for the hotel development permits at 699 Oceana Boulevard based on the following. One, zoning standard nonconformance. The proposed building height exceeds the allowable building height of 35 feet. The proposed building height to the roof parapet, which is most of the roof sight line there, is at the maximum allowable 35 feet, and there is a portion of the building at the west side front elevation that extends above the 35 feet roof parapet. This portion of the building is not dimensioned or labeled on the drawings and appears to scale additional 3 feet higher than the extending the building height to be 38 feet. And this portion of the building houses the activity conference room mentioned earlier. This space does not, I guess, want a low ceiling height, so it has a very tall ceiling height and it extends 3 feet above the maximum allowable 35 feet height limit. According to the PC staff report, the proposed motel has a roof height of 32 feet 6 inches to the building plate line, but that's the building plate line. It's not the roof. And it also states that the decorative and screening parapets surrounding the roof perimeter increase the height another 2 feet to 5 feet. But the portion that is extending it beyond the 35 feet to 38 feet is not decorative or screening parapet. It's actually part of the building.
Great, thank you. I think that was 3. Yeah, so we got your written comments, though? You could submit them to staff. So, unfortunately, I can't do that, sorry. I'm sorry, but that wouldn't be fair to other speakers, and it's not the way it's going to be done. All right, I'm very sorry, but that it would not be fair to the other speakers who stayed within 3 minutes. But if we're going to need a recess, we're going to call a recess.
Ladies and gentlemen, please follow the decorum and listen to the chairperson.
Well, the chairperson should listen.
All right. So we're going to take a recess of 5 minutes.
Yes. I can give you the one with the signature. I'll just get another copy.
Sure. I'll give you my card if you want. I'm happy to give you a copy.
Yeah, I've spoken to you on the phone.
wish to speak on this who hasn't yet spoken, fill out a card in the back, hand it to staff. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. We have 3 more speakers left. Let's see. And we've got Mark Nicodemus, Jen Strobeck, and then Philippe Lazaro.
I brought a date. I brought my wife. We're the Nick and Izzy of the Nick and Izzy.
Can you state your name for the
behind
record, just for our poor transcriber, so we can get the names?
Talk slowly?
No, can you state your name for the record?
Oh, that's what I was saying. We're the Nick and Izzy of the Nick and
Oh, you
Izzy
did?
that
Okay,
lives
sorry.
behind the property,
Matthews.
directly behind the property. Real quick, before I even say anything, everybody knows this site is too small for this hotel. You know this, they know this, we know this, the architect knows this, the owner knows this. The reason is you have to cut into 40 feet into the side, 20 feet into the back. You can't even go around the hotel. You have to cantilever the second story so you can get underneath the hotel. You have to park under the hotel. You don't have enough parking, but I'm going to move forward from that because you're going to move forward approving it. So I want to take my issues up that's with here. I live directly behind this hotel proposed. By the way, I think the architects have done a great job pushing a 9-foot shoe. Oh, did you get my name? I'm sorry.
Our
She's saying.
address.
Oh, 624 Edgemore. Did you get
Just
that?
your name,
Okay,
it's
sorry.
fine, but thanks.
We live directly behind the property, so I think he did a good job building a hotel, proposing a hotel. I think the hotel's beautiful. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think he looked at our concerns, but I think we have other concerns, and I talked with the Brian here, who is the landscape architect, because that's my problem. You're cutting into our property. The first thing is you're blocking my ocean views. That's why we live in Pacifica, for the ocean, for the hills. And you're cutting into the hills, so you're taking away the 2 things that we live here for. Number 2, you're taking away our privacy. Instead of our hotel view, our ocean views, the hotel people are going to be looking into our bedrooms now. So we were talking to Brian, if this is going to go forward, there's got to be some way to mitigate the privacy, trees, landscaping, earth berms, something's got to be changed with that. You're going to take away our security. We're proposing putting a wall, some sort of, just a redwood fence across the back, so it would, I see what it says.
You still have another minute.
To propose a wall or fence to block some of the pollution, the light, the noise, the people looking into our property. I'm not asking for much with this hotel, but the biggest part is the land. There's 2 hills coming together. I don't know if you've been to this property, and they're cutting 40 feet into one side, they're cutting 20 feet on the other side, backing right up to our property. If I walk my dog or our kids, our grandkids go out there, we're not going to fall 20 feet into the parking lot. They're putting a 41-inch metal fence. That's going to stop everything. It's just concerns that I'm bringing up here about the property. This entire hill, it flows. All the water flows into this property. So it's eroding. It's been eroding for years. I'm just concerned that no one's looked at this as far as the hills itself. We're talking to Brian about they're going to put a wall up. You didn't know which the wall was, these earth walls. Oh, I lost my time. But let me just say one final thing. The staff here has worked great with us explaining this process, but we are very concerned about what's going on with the property, with our privacy, with losing our view, and with what's going to happen to the actual hill itself. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Okay, Gene Strobeck, followed by Felipe Lazaro, and then I have 2 more cards after that.
Hello, I'm Jean Strobeck. I live within 300 feet of the proposed hotel. I think this is the first I've heard of it relatively recently, and I'm distressed that I didn't hear about it or get a mailing in January so that I could come and get a bit more of a heads up. But it seems an unlikely and inappropriate location. You're essentially turning an area of beautiful natural beauty into a business park. And I really, really question your success rate. What are you going to do a year or 2 years from now when you realize that you can't fill the rooms? You know, what's going to happen to that building? Is it going to be another rust bucket?
And please speak into the mic because we're not going to get your comments in the record otherwise.
I'm sorry. I thought I was speaking loudly enough. what are you going to do a year or two from now when you find that you failed? I think it's going to end up being one of those old rusty buildings. I beg of you to sell this property to the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. I think it would be a good use of the land. But why would you want to build a hotel right next to a fire department, right along a path of 3 schools? And it sounds like it's not legal. It sounds like the height level is not legal at all. And I've asked the owner what he meant about the Pacifica being underserved for hotels, and I don't think that's true at all. We have many hotels, and there seems to always be a vacancy, and they're in more appropriate areas. So those are my thoughts, and thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Felipe Lazaro, and then Vivian Zeeland.
Hello. So again, like a few of us, I'm here a little bit late to this party. I feel like I didn't get all the info early on, so I just want to make it a little bit clear. I don't have all the engineering and all these other ideas really clear, so I'm just going to skip all that and go to the basics. What do we as neighbors and residents of the area get out of this? How different is this in a mine that takes things away without giving back to the community and the neighborhood? Jobs, the owner said there's going to be maintained by very few staff, so it's not a lot of jobs. Parking, we already have issues with this. Is it revenue? I mean, I've been in Pacifica, my wife grew up here, but I'm in Pacifica not that long, and I've seen house prices skyrocket. So the revenue coming from that is not improving Pacifica since I've been coming here for 15 years. You can do Mars landing trainings on my street. It is, I don't see trees, I don't see beautifying. So what is this? You know, the architect was saying that he used to come to Spanky's or Sparky's, however it was, to breakfast on Sundays. The residents will have no access to this because this is only for guests. If you live here, you're not going to go stay there. So, and the breakfast and all this is for guests only. So what are we as a community getting out of this? What are we getting out of this? And honestly, I just don't see it. So it does feel like the more transient and the needs for people to stay overnight is not in that part of town and not that part of the city. And so you carving into the neighborhood, the quiet, tranquil Pacifica neighborhood that we live in, to bring something that does not provide a cool new restaurant or services that us residents will benefit from. You just put in something there that none of us will get anything really, because if we live here, we're not staying there. We don't get a lot of jobs because there's no staff. What are we getting out of this? And I give my 45 seconds for clapping for someone else, not for me, please.
All right. Next up is Vivian Zeeland, and then my last card up is Christopher Tung.
I think I'm feeling a little bit edgy today because I've just paid my property tax, which is exorbitant.
Okay, and you're going to want to maybe bring the mic down just a bit so we can get your records in the comp.
And I didn't hear anything about the January meeting. I'm concerned that this is going to be a shoo-in for the roadway, which we did hear about, which there was a lot of opposition to. I'm a person who uses the 1110 bus stop and the 118, which none of you seem to know about, because I happen to be a pedestrian that enjoys walking in the area, and I'm out of my car. I think it's a beautiful neighborhood in terms of friendliness, in terms of children walking about. I think this adds nothing. It's not suitable for the space, and I'm amazed no one has mentioned the hospice, which is alongside of it. What effect is that going to have on the patients in the hospice? Not one word about that. You'd like to continue?
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the land use, according to the general plan for this property site is actually...
Microphone, please.
And point of
And-
order.
The land use
Want to state your
designation.
name for the record?
My name is Christine Fagan.
This isn't the way it's supposed to work, by the way.
Point of order, Chair.
Okay, so the land use
Yes.
designation for this project is retail
I will allow
commercial.
it in this one aspect, but you're, when time's up, time's up.
Okay, so it's retail commercial. And this land use designation is not tourist-serving commercial, which allows uses of hotels and motels and other tourist-serving businesses. And also about the zoning, the C2, community commercial. So the conditional use for this is allowable motel conditional use. I don't think that really applies. I think people are using, it's actually a hotel, and a hotel and motel is not interchangeable. There are two definitions for hotel and motel in this section 9.2 of the municipal code. So I don't want to get too much into that. But let's go back to the land use. So the under and not utilized visitor serving commercial land use, i.e. hotels and motels and other tourist serving business. The coastal zone has about 110 acres of vacant or underutilized land for this designation. 155,000 square feet that is for this non-commercial kind of development. And then, so of the
Thank you very
vacant and
much,
underutilized user
but
area,
have
they're
to
all
end
in the
this.
Rockaway Beach area,
Next up would be Christopher Tung. Thank you. You're. All right, Christopher Tung, and I'm out of cards. If anyone wishes to speak, now's the time to put a card up.
Good evening. My name is Christopher Tung. I live at 203 Milagro, which is at the intersection of Milagro and Edgemar next to the fire station. So I am pretty damn close to the proposed hotel. 3 points that I want to make tonight. First of all, I have not seen a valid or even any business case for having this hotel in this place. A few years ago, I think it came to the very first meeting where the plans were presented, and I posed a question to the Pacifica, I think the Planning Commission, and I think these are the people who should know this. I said, what is the occupancy rate in Pacifica? And they kind of looked at me like I was asking some strange alien question. So I have not seen any business case made that we have so many people coming in here that need a hotel so that we need to build one. I have had heard no quotes on occupancy rate. I'm gonna guess it's not close to 100. And, you know, I just want to make that point clear. The other 2 points, I am a parent. My kids are going or have gone to 3 of the schools that are close by: Ocean Shore, Good Shepherd, Oceana. I've dropped them off at school. I live in that traffic. I see the traffic. My kids have walked to school. My kids have skateboarded to school. Right down the street, cars are parked on the sidewalk. And we have not ameliorated any of that traffic issue there. So the 2 points I want to make are, number one, I was in the last planning meeting about the proposed new traffic light and, you know, highway work. And there have been no traffic mitigation measures and actions taken. And number two, I'm just concerned that we're bringing more people in who are transient and are going to contribute to the traffic issue, as well as the safety of our children who walk, cycle, skate to school. And I don't know how you guys could even consider this and let us get this far.
All right, we have one more speaker, Ina Gortsky. Ina Gorski?
Okay. Thanks, everybody, for giving me time. So, a few words, first of all, about that general Pacific plan. You have a section, community design element. And one of that is say, preserve the unique quality of the city's neighborhood. I think the proposed development doesn't comply with that. And then you have another item under the same section, establish development standard that would keep open the steep slopes and visually prominent ridge lines. I think that is also, this item was kind of overlooked with this proposed development. So about the traffic concern, so this traffic impact analysis, which was prepared by applicant consultant for the proposed project, is dated May 4, 2015. So the city consultant performed a peer review and issued its finding in a letter dated August 10, 2016. And then the applicant consultant amended the TIA to correct typographic errors and inconsistencies and expand the analysis completeness and issued a revised TIA dated November 9, 2017. So actually this outdated TIA it absolutely doesn't reflect the current increased traffic pattern which Caltrans have concluded. So, for instance, the public TA conclusion didn't include in consideration public transit, there's a bus stop, and also peak hours that specify, and this table, it doesn't take into consideration the traffic from the three neighboring schools, especially from 1 to 4 p.m. This traffic congestion increased in 4 or 5 times, but the TIA analysis doesn't mention this at all. So also TIA says traffic impact based on estimated traffic generated by project as compared to the condition of the vicinity of the project using the level of service method. So with the current increased traffic, this level of service method designation will change, making some intersection operate below the city standard. For example, there is approximately a backup of 12-20 vehicles traveling northbound of Ashana Boulevard, the manor on Ashana Boulevard during the daily peak hours. But this increase, this traffic, the number of vehicles increase during that peak hours when the school session ended. So 3 school, the traffic, the parents pick up kids, or the actually student driving, it's about, you can make the 12-20 vehicle multiply by 5.
Thank you very much. And you have 3 minutes left, but I appreciate it.
Yes,
Thank you.
thanks for your time.
Okay, I don't have any other cards up for public comment, so at this point, I'd like to invite the applicant up, if he or she so wishes, to address public comments.
Thank you, Commissioners. As I mentioned earlier, I am into a hotel business. I am operating several other hotels. It is absolutely safe and sound business. Hotels are required in every community. This is a 31-room. Absolutely, it will be designed to fit a boutique-ness and the nature of this town. We've been working on this project for quite a few years. The reason it was not in front of you is because we wanted to make sure we meet every aspects, every ordinance that town requires to meet for this project. We've gone through that. Absolutely, this hotel will create several jobs, over 16 jobs directly at the hotel. and several indirect jobs. Very obvious, it will generate transient occupancy tax revenue to the city in north of $200,000 a year. It will generate property tax in north of $90,000 a year. There are several benefits that town and community will enjoy. The transient guests that we're talking about are those who comes and spends on various towns, including many in Pacifica. They'll be here. When they stay at the hotel, they will be eating at local restaurants. They'll be filling a gas next door at Chevron stations. So there's many other benefits that associates with this project. I'm here to request and look for your approval and move forward with this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, at this point, we're going to bring it back to the Commission for deliberation. I had a quick question for staff. So, let's say 4 or 5 years ago, we had a study session on the hotel on this site, and was this the same consortium, same applicant owner?
I'm not entirely sure if the owner was the same. The concept, generally similar, but very many of the specifics of the building layout and the site layout have changed in response to comments at the study session, implementation of city code requirements, design suggestions from staff, and design suggestions from members of the community.
The reason I'm asking is I recall the parking being a big issue at that time, and that the applicant was talking about having valets moving their car into the neighborhood and things like that, and there was, I think, no commissioner in favor of that, and kind of a go back to the drawing board type of moment. And I'm just wondering, with the parking situations that we have here tonight that we heard about, I mean, is there a need for more parking even though they're meeting the code?
Well, there's, it's my recollection that there were several fewer spaces proposed in the earlier version of this project, and so it sounds like the applicant took to heart the concern about the number of spaces. In part, that colored staff's analysis of the request for the parking exception. You'll notice in the staff report that although the proportion of compact spaces would be exceeded, it seemed to be that the applicant was striving to provide the number of spaces that would be needed to park the project on site. And so it sounds as though in an attempt to exceed the zoning requirement by one space, the applicant is seeking this parking exception. As far as a requirement for more parking than the zoning would require, we have not identified any evidence that would support that request at this time.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Clifford.
Okay. I want to go to the height issue. I'm seeing that the 32 feet to the top of the plate is kind of an unusual thing to come before us. Generally speaking, it's from the lowest point to the highest point, and then we have a parapet on top of that that apparently goes from 2 feet 6 inches to 5 feet. And I'd like to know if there's any particular reason that we couldn't reduce the heights of the first floor and each of the additional floors. We've got a 14 and a half foot tall first floor, and then the second and the third floor are 9 feet each in terms of the interior. So is there a way to reduce each by 6-8 inches and get us closer to the 35?
Sure. So to start off, I think it's best to have the applicant address the impacts to the constructability or desirability of the operation. I think many people will recognize that tall ceiling heights make a space more inviting and comfortable, particularly the ground floor of a motel, where you have a lobby function where people will be spending time and gathering as they await to check in or check out or enjoy the breakfast service. Already a 9-foot ceiling height is not particularly high, and the more that you lower it, the more that it could impact the feeling of the size of the rooms and make them feel cramped, for instance, with too low a ceiling height, but the applicant is probably best situated to discuss that. To the question of height, yes, it is a little bit unusual for us to reflect height to the top of plate. We did that because of the variability of the roof line. We wanted to indicate what the actual building mass itself had in terms of a height. The height goes above the 32 feet that are stated on the plans on sheet A7 in packet page 288. Yes, there is a parapet surrounding the roof, and that is allowed to exceed the height limit, although I don't believe that that's the case for the vast majority of the perimeter of the roof. That is indicated to be approximately 2 feet 6 inches in height above 32 feet, and so less than 35 feet, the zoning height limit. In addition, there is a portion of the building which goes above 35 feet. It's that central art feature that's prominent on the front elevation on packet page 288. That is a very small portion of the horizontal and vertical component of the building. You can see comparatively on sheets A7 and A8. If you look at the front elevation, you see it's in that central portion. And if you look at the proposed south side elevation on packet page 290, you see that very small portion on the top left of that drawing that height in excess of 35 feet would comprise. To be fair, just because it's a small amount doesn't make it code compliant, and so in the staff's analysis of the project, it's municipal code section 9-4.2501, which allows certain types of architectural features to exceed the zoning height limit. And I'll quickly read that section. It says, cupolas, flagpoles, monuments, parapet walls, gas storage holders, water tanks, church steeples, and similar structures and mechanical appurtenances may be permitted to exceed the height limits for the district in which they are located, provided a site development permit is first obtained as set forth and then it makes the code reference. Chimneys may exceed such height limits with approval from the planning administrator. As noted in the staff report packet, this project has requested a site development permit, and so the appropriate authority to exceed the 35 feet has been provided. It's staff's opinion that the code provides broad discretion. It's not limiting in the types of features that may exceed the height. It says, and similar structures. I think that it's reasonable to conclude that the structure that's proposed is one of the types of structures envisioned and allowed to exceed the height in this code section.
Thank you very much for that.
All right. Please, let's just continue with the meeting. Let's try to be civil and let's get this done. Commissioner Neblin.
Thank you. Just a couple questions for staff. And again, I want to focus on maybe a couple of general plan and maybe zoning related things as well. One of the comments, or maybe it came up multiple times, that comment regarding sort of the difference between motel and hotel. And I know there was a write-up in the staff report that dealt with this, but I was hoping maybe you could articulate again, maybe in sort of lay people terms, sort of what that issue is and what staff's position is on it.
Of course. We noted in the staff report a vagueness or a discrepancy, if you will, in the fact that the zoning provisions describe a motel as a conditional use, but the zoning does not define what a motel is. The zoning does define what a hotel is. And I think they're both commonly understood to be visitor-type accommodations for transient purposes of short-term occupancies, typically 30 days or less. In trying to reconcile that odd omission of a definition of a motel, but an inclusion of a motel as a conditional use, we saw no distinction in the two types of uses, in that they both serve that same core function of providing short-term lodgings for visitors. Combining that with the general plan, which is controlling and should determine what is in the zoning, the general plan rather for the commercial land use designation indicates visitor serving commercial uses as being appropriate uses. So piecing that together, the general plan, the hotel and the motel use indicated in the zoning, and piecing that together with the city's transient occupancy tax definition of what transient occupancies include, which includes motels, hotels, and other types of short-term lodgings. It was it was staff's opinion that piecing those all together on balance, there was no useful distinction between a hotel and a motel in this context.
Thank you. Just to follow up with another, I guess, unrelated issue, a couple of comments that were relating to sort of the currentness of the traffic analysis and sort of the, what we're dealing with, contemporarily with respect to traffic. And I wanted to know if staff had any comment or thoughts on that.
Sure. I think it's a reasonable comment to wonder, the relevance of data that may have been combined, 3 or 4 years ago, or compiled and gathered, rather.
Yeah.
With that in mind, I may defer to our engineering staff that's present to indicate if they have any observations about traffic levels in the area as compared to 2015. I didn't hear anything in the public comments which provided any evidence of what those actual traffic levels are. There's speculation that they've increased, but it's often that if you're caught in the traffic, you think the traffic is terrible, and if you're not, maybe you don't think twice about it. So for purposes of the analysis, the traffic study really was only to support the environmental determination which was prepared. And so the evidence that we have in the record is substantial evidence at this time to support the categorical exemption.
Okay. So maybe we'll put a tack in that. I see we've got somebody who could perhaps speak to it, but I have one other question, and it was really pertaining to some of the comments about, the desirability perhaps of housing, maybe affordable housing. And I'm really kind of interested in sort of the general plan and the zoning implications of something like that. You just sort of recognizing the general plan is put together as sort of a kind of a constitution for the way we sort of develop things and sort of the desirability for certain mixes of different kinds of uses in different places. I was wondering if staff had any particular thoughts on those comments.
Of course. I'll just make one more point on the traffic observation. I think, again, the concern was well taken with respect to the age of the information in the traffic study. What I will say is the trip generation rates have not been identified to have changed. So this land use, will continue to generate the types of uses that were projected in 2015. And so their impact on the environment, the traffic environment in the area, I should say, may change depending on the baseline levels. But whether this project will generate more traffic or not, there's no indication it will generate traffic at any different level than was already analyzed.
Thank you.
With respect to the appropriate land uses for the area, as you mentioned, the general plan controls the type of zoning which may implement those uses. The type of use, the motel use, is a permissible use in the visitor serving description that's in the commercial land use designation. Commercial land use, the commercial land use designation also allows housing in a mixed use configuration. It does require that it be in the same building as a commercial use above the ground floor. And so a mixed use project with housing above the ground floor could have been proposed at this site. It's the property owner's prerogative to propose whatever he or she wants to propose on the site in conformance with the applicable regulations, which at this time allow a motel use to be proposed. And so that was the property owner's discretion, and we've reviewed that application for conformance with all of the city's regulations. I'll note that a motel use is a conditional use, which connotes that there could be some undesirable or concerning aspects of the use which require more careful consideration in a particular location, and that's the process that we're undertaking tonight, to hear from the community, to hear from the planning commissioners as expert residents in the community, and to get factual information from staff and our consultants about the appropriateness of this use in this specific location.
And just a couple of other thoughts that occurred to me. One was sort of the hours for the balconies. I saw that 6 a.m. actually to 10 p.m. were, if I was understanding correctly, hours that were proposed for at least one. I wasn't sure some balcony that appeared to be sort of an outdoor gathering area that caught my attention and caused me some concern. And the other thing that concerned me, and maybe it can be talked about at some point as we're moving forward, is sort of construction-related impacts and mitigation of what I think could be, quite fairly concerns given some of the uses in the area about the construction in particular, and maybe hours of construction, ways to mitigate or attenuate some of the impacts that would occur in the course of construction if this project were to go forward. And I wasn't clear to me, whether the conditions of approval were necessarily as robust as they might be around some of those concerns, and whether or not we as a commission have some discretion to perhaps say a little more about that in the context of the conditions.
Sure. So a number of topics addressed there. The hours of operation that are identified in the staff report and the conditions of approval pertain to the outdoor deck on the front of the building. It's a common space use. Those hours of operation, which we included, reflected the hours the commission imposed on other outdoor areas in the recent past, which had neighbors which were concerned about the impacts of that outdoor noise. There's certainly not a code requirement. It is subject to the commission's discretion to change or eliminate those hours should it find a good reason to do that. The conditions of approval do not include particular hours for the balconies off of the individual rooms. We believe that would be very difficult for the city to enforce as a condition of approval, but perhaps it's something that could be explored if there's a concern about those balconies. As far as construction impacts, we believe that the limited construction hours that already exist in the municipal code are likely to be adequate. 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, I believe, and then somewhat shorter hours, perhaps 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. or thereabouts on Saturday and Sunday. Typically, keep construction out of those hours that are of great concern for noise impacts. Beyond that, in terms of impacts to traffic, typically there's a traffic control plan for any temporary road closures or lane closures, not typically a road closure for a project like this, but any impacts to through lanes that could affect an intersection. Our Public Works Department reviews those very carefully. They require an encroachment permit to be issued, which can set hours of operation, and we leave it to those engineering experts on the city staff to determine what those best hours should be for a particular project in a particular location.
Thank you for reminding me of that. Thanks.
Commissioner Bigstick.
Sure, and I have a couple follow-up questions to Commissioner Niblin and then a handful of other questions. First of all, when it comes to construction and noise, on page 358 of the packet, there's a list of best practices for construction noise. I was just wondering, it didn't look like they were included in the resolution or as a condition. Am I mistaken, and could they be incorporated?
You're not mistaken. Those are best practices for a reason. They're not mitigations in the environmental usage of the word. The project's factual analysis did not find any significant environmental impacts related to noise, either from operation or construction of the project. If there's some other basis, for public health and safety and welfare, due to the annoyance of the use or something to that effect, perhaps it's something that could be explored to require adherence to those best practices, but that's the reason that they were not included.
Thank you. And then back to the hotel-motel discussion, I was wondering if there is a zoning district in which the term hotel specifically is used.
Not to my knowledge.
So the closest we get to the specific term hotel is motel, which falls under C1.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I did have a couple follow-up questions for the applicant, if that's okay.
That would be fine. We can bring
Cool.
the applicant back up.
And first of all, did you receive any feedback from the convalescent home?
I'm sorry?
Did you get any feedback from the convalescent home, which is...
Yes, I have spoken to the nuns, and they, they said they couldn't come tonight. They wanted to come. I made them aware that today was a hearing, but they don't seem too involved in the process. I talked to them once, and I called them again today. Their phone is normally busy, and most of the heads of the community, sometimes they're busy somewhere else. So nobody could come. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And then my other question for you was, I think you said you'd in total be employing about 16 people as staff. I'm wondering, at any given moment, what's the maximum number of staff you might have on premises working, and what's the minimum number you might have working at a moment?
Minimum would be one. Maximum would depend on the occupancy, but if the hotel is 100% occupied, we would have a front desk manager and a housekeeping staff. For a size of 31 rooms, it could be between 5 to 8.
Thank you. Okay, so for city staff, the on-ramp on Milagro, how long has that plan been in process?
We could have the city's engineering representative answer that.
Good evening, Raymond Dunginis, Senior Civil Engineer, City of Pacifica. The Manor Overcrossing project has been on the books since 1990s, and I think it was in the early 2000s that the on-ramp was developed. The Milagro on-ramp project was included with the Manor Overcrossing project.
Started in the 1990s, and it's been more rigorously developed since early 2000s.
Correct, and as recently as last year, the city did get a Measure A grant to start the design, the early design, the pre-design of the projects.
So it would seem reasonable to suggest that if the city had had money, you said early 2000s, so that's upwards of 2 decades ago, perhaps this would have gotten started sooner.
Correct, yeah, it's dependent on funding, yes.
Thank you very much. Is there any parking on the west side of Oceana? I know there's parking on the east side of Oceana closest to the property. Are people allowed to park on the west side of Oceana Boulevard?
To my knowledge, no, but perhaps Mr. Dunginis can speak to the situation and the reason if there is no parking.
There is no parking on the west side of Oceana.
Thank you. So I had a
We're going to
question
have to
for
please
the
limit your
chief
side comments.
about schools specifically in relation
I'm going
to.
to have to please ask you to stop interjecting into the proceedings, or we're going to have to take another recess, and I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question for the chief, if I may, about schools. And I figure if I were a parent, I'd be concerned if a fly were buzzing too close to my child. The staff report suggests that was open-ended. So I'm asking you, why should I not be concerned about schools this close to a motel from the standpoint of security for our children?
Good evening, I'm Dan Stidler, your Chief of Police. Commissioner, when we look at something like this, staff did take a look at one of the letters that was sent, and there were some concerns from our good residents regarding that. While we don't have any hotels currently placed near our schools right now, we take a look at the type of crimes that we have that are occurring because of hotels, specifically in our community. I'll give you an example. We have the 6 primary hotels we looked at. We did an analysis for the crimes that have occurred over the last few years. Type of crimes that you see are the occasional auto burglary. I was actually quite surprised to find that it was extremely low rate. 7 auto burglaries in 6 hotels combined in the last 3 years. The type of things we'd worry about with our children would be assaults, assault and batteries. One citizen even commented in a letter regarding sex trafficking in the proximity to schools. I would note that most of your crimes that occur at hotels that have to do with sexual assaults they're not strangers. They are people that end up in the hotel room together. Usually one person's intoxicated and something happens that was not welcome to happen, and someone becomes victimized. In the last 3 years, we have no reports of any type of stranger sexual assaults, nor any involving children. To put the rest of the idea that perhaps sex trafficking would occur because of the proximity to schools and children passing, the idea of, you have to understand how sex trafficking occurs. And the Pacifica Police Department is involved in the countywide effort to curtail sex trafficking, which has been pushed forward by our state senators. So what you have to understand, what occurs with that, they're not situations where a stranger reaches out and grabs a kid and brings the kid into a hotel room. It has nothing to do with the hotel. Sex trafficking has to do with children who for whatever reason, or even adults that are, they may be underprivileged, they may be in a bad situation, they may be roaming with gang members or people on the streets that, you know, aren't your upstanding citizens. They get caught up with the wrong group, and then they end up coming into contact with someone who wants to traffic them. They usually end up getting taken out of the area and end up in perhaps a shady apartment complex or some low-end motel someplace. Now, what happens that we have found in this county, as have been many counties, specifically in our county, since we've been as part of this task force for several years, is we're not seeing sex trafficking occurring in our county in terms of our residents being victims. What we're seeing is some of the lower-end neighborhoods in surrounding counties, every once in a while, somebody being brought into our county from those areas. So in terms of a hotel near a school, my department doesn't have any concerns regarding children becoming victims of crimes. The only concerns we would have to do with traffic and pedestrian safety, and we understand that's already been addressed in the reports.
Sure, one more question for you. Do you receive many noise complaints from the other hotels in our city?
No, it's actually pretty rare too, but the ones we do get are usually room to room. Somebody playing their television too loud and the management not being able to handle it, and the management calling us, asking us to take care of the problem.
Thank you very much.
All right, you mind if I, or do you have?
Well, I had one more question for staff, and then I had it's kind of a wrap-up comment rather than question.
Okay.
Sure. And so my question for staff is, I grew up in Pacifica, but on the weekends, I spent in San Bruno, so I also grew up in San Bruno, right next to the airport. And at some point, it occurred to, I think it was the airport themselves, I don't know that the city required them to do it, but for whatever reason, they were subsidizing windows to mitigate airplane noise at some point. Is it in our purview to put as a condition that they have to update the windows in the surrounding area?
It certainly, in my opinion, is within the commission's purview if it can point to evidence that this project would create significant noise. It's the analysis that's in the record that would not be the case. In the absence of that evidence, there would be no basis that I can think of for the commission to require that. The window replacements that you're referring to were the result of very specific technical analysis of the noise generated by aircraft, which at very high noise levels, which are impactful to public health. And as a result, they required mitigation, and there was a robust program in communities surrounding the airport to replace windows in those areas within the defined noise contours based on that analysis. So there was a very technical component to that, which resulted in the very sort of low-tech window replacement on the ground.
So the reason I asked that specifically, one of the people in the audience asked if any of us had experience living directly behind a hotel. And I do, motel rather. In the place I stayed in San Bruno, 848 Hensley, it's right across the street, literally right across the street. I step across the street, I'm in the motel. And so I have very literal, direct experience living right across the street from a motel. I'm happy to report that noise for the most part was not an issue, you know, every so often, and I've lived in the back of the Valley Pacifica, and I've lived there across from a hotel. You know, my neighbors throw a party, there's noise in the back of the valley. At a hotel, on occasion, there's a thing in a parking lot. And they're at most on par, although I asked the question about the windows because the neighbors are right there. I do have concern that the neighbors are right there, and I figure if that was a thing, then we could at least ask politely the hotel maybe provide windows on account of noise. The other thing was the house behind had expressed concern with privacy, and as I was looking at the property, it occurred to me that the second story level maybe was mitigated by the fencing and the wall, but the third story, it occurred to me, I was not sure if the awning itself would provide enough cover that the third story would not be able to look directly into that backyard, and that was a concern of mine. After that, the parking. okay, 85% of the parking is what we account for, in which case that's 28 out of 33 spots. If staffing is at 5 max, or on a max day, which could actually be 8 according to the applicant, but if on a heavy day it's 5, and we're accounting for 85%, then that fills all the spots. I did find a definition of a motel, which was a roadside hotel designed primarily for motorists. When I looked up a definition, that was the first thing that came up. As I was looking at the property itself and trying to find my own place where I could park, it wasn't difficult with no motel there, but immediately as I was looking for a place to park and most of the spot was filled, I had the concern, and that's without a driveway there, that's without the 3 spaces taken away from a driveway. And if I want to visit Aunt Sally when she comes all the way from Oregon to visit Pacifica, and that's the place she's staying, I want to be able to have a place to park. And so that's probably of everything, my largest concern is that I don't think that the parking was well enough accounted for, though I appreciate fully that there was a fairly ardent attempt to make sure there were enough spaces there, that it meets code with an exception. I'm not sure if I personally am comfortable with that exception, given that as a whole, I'm not sure parking was well enough taken into account. If there's consensus, I'd probably go along with it, no problem. But again, I do strongly urge that I have that concern. And I do believe that with this much consternation in the audience, it will come up for appeal before council. And before this goes up to appeal before council, what occurs to me is I'd at least like to be able to say that I voted for something that had a fully adequate, undisputable parking program in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Clifford.
I would like to ask my height question of the architect, if that's possible.
Yes, Commissioner.
I don't know if you heard my question earlier or not, but is there a way to reduce each floor just a small amount to help alleviate the going over 35 feet?
Sure. I think I'll discuss it with the owner. My feeling was to, planning said, to provide a space that is more comfortable. But the typical height is 8 feet, as you know. 8'6" is also comfortable. The main floor was raised, the second floor was raised to allow the fire truck to come around. That was the reason before we had it lower. So we had to raise the entire floor to allow, because the truck has a certain clearance, which is 14 feet. And I had a meeting with the fire chief, and we went over the drawings, and he said, let's do this. So that's why we have it like that.
Thank you for that. I was trying to understand why it had to be the 14 feet 6 inches, and that makes that very clear to me. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think that lowering the roof, I'm with Senior Planner Murdoch in that if you lower the ceiling heights, it's going to get more cramped for a hotel. On the flip side, my issue with, I remember with the study session on this a few years ago, my issue with this location is that kind of it'd be an issue that I would have if it were housing. It's a poor location for folks to come and stay, really. You are next to right next to the gas station. You're next to a fire station. You're across from the freeway. It's a perfect place for a Class A type commercial building, which is, I think, I've heard a lot of people say we desperately need in town. This seems shoehorned in to me. I felt like it during the study session as well. Not to say that something like this couldn't work, but I'm I'm definitely struggling with seeing how you shoehorn this in. It's a tough call because TOT tax in this town is one of the significant revenue generators in this town. It's second, I think. It's besides, I think, the gas tax. So, and there is, I think, an occupancy rate argument to be made, from my understanding, for more hotels. But I don't know. I'd be curious to hear a little bit more from the commission. But I'm just wondering if this is the right facility in the right place. Commissioner Neville.
Thank you, Chair. I just feel compelled to I guess, dovetail or maybe respond to your comment. I mean, I think there's a certain amount of deference that we frankly need to, sort of afford to property owners who bring forward proposals and who presumably have done their own kind of analysis of whether or not there's a good business case for an operation like this at a place like this. I think that there's a certain amount of chicken and egg or sort of catalyst, analysis that ought to be considered in a situation like this. I go down there all the time. My gym's right within, it's within walking distance of there. So I'm down there all the time, and I'm on that road all the time. I know there's a Vietnamese restaurant that has just opened, and it's a pretty good Mexican restaurant that's very close by, easy walking. Mazzetti's is right down the way. There's a sushi restaurant that's right close by. So I think there are actually quite a few amenities that would benefit from having some customers to increase the base, particularly customers who might be walking. So I frankly think it's probably an interesting and maybe even a good location for something like this. I recognize that there are impacts to be mitigated. There are concerns that we need to address, but I frankly am I'm compelled that it's to think that it's a project that we ought to really seriously consider supporting.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think I just put a gloss on what I said. I do appreciate. I think it would probably fill. I think there is a business case for this hotel here. It will do probably fairly well. And you're right, it is close to some pretty good eateries. And I guess my concern is whether it's the most desirable hotel that we could get there, or commercial facility. Commissioner Clifford.
Okay, I'm going to agree with Commissioner Niblin. I think this is a good project. I think it will enhance the neighborhood. I'm not overly concerned about noise or the traffic impacts. We're actually, once the Manor overpass is done, traffic is going to be lightening up in that general area because it will be much a smoother going through that Manor intersection, which sometimes backs up back there. So I think in terms of by the time the hotels build, and they're actually working on the Manor overpass, we're going to see an improvement in the general traffic in the area, and the hotel's impact will be less noticeable. In terms of the heights that I asked about, I am now convinced that there's no reason to change them. It's a good-looking building, and if we were to bring down that one little central section, then we wind up with no real architectural features to the building, because then it just becomes a flat roof all the way across. That little feature with the artwork on the glass is quite nice and enhances the building. I can't see any reason for me not to vote for this.
All right. Who do we have? Rubenstein? Commissioner Rubenstein? Is that? No, overshot it.
Was
Sorry.
it me?
Yes.
Yeah. I have a hybrid opinion amongst my fellow commissioners. I believe that the property probably can be enhanced from what it is right now. I would like to see more community involvement. I don't know if that's amenities within the building, and an opportunity is the zoning here. Seems like there could be an opportunity for better community involvement. The area in general does not seem like too high of a desirable place, given it's nearby Chevron and there isn't too much development in the area, but I think it has potential with the upcoming traffic improvements and the pedestrian connection that's nearby. I would like to see, if we were to continue this topic, perhaps, I don't know, if an opportunity for a revision to the TIA to incorporate parking questions that have come up today, as well as any new enhancements with traffic within the area over the past 2 years since the last revision. Possibly amenities such as opening the juice bar to the public or a trail along the landscaping, better privacy screening with landscaping is an idea that I have. Touching on construction, I'd be interested to see the plan for construction staging, given the elevation difficulties in the area and the space difficulties and not wanting to impact the existing traffic. Yeah, I have a hybrid opinion as of now.
Well, I don't see any other lights, so I'd like to offer that I think a continuance to look at some of these issues that have, I think, been very prudently raised by Commissioner Berman, I think would be helpful. I mean, I know that there was some concern about the currency of the traffic analysis, and I think a little more information around all that. Commissioner Bigstick had expressed some concerns about parking. I don't personally necessarily share them, but I certainly think that some additional information on that might be warranted, and certainly at least one neighbor, a neighbor who is located very close to the project, expressed some concerns about perhaps some additional screening, maybe some safety-related concerns that might be appropriate to get a little more information on as well. So I would certainly be in support of a continuance of an appropriate length to sort of nail down some of those issues that that you've raised, that Commissioner Bigstick had spoken to. I think that would be we'd certainly want to make sure that we've done as much diligence as possible, recognizing that this could well end up being discussed at length at another level. We'd certainly want to make sure that we've touched bases or touched all those bases.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that sentiment as well. I think if I was going to add one thing too, and I'm kind of surprised it didn't come up as much, would be lighting in the back for the parking, because I know that was that's been a significant consideration in other hotel projects that we've looked at over the years, and restaurants, is the lighting that affects the neighbors in the back, and there's a significant amount of parking in the back, so I wonder how much they'd have to light it up. And I didn't see that, we didn't discuss that much tonight. So it would be good to get a little bit more on that. Let's see, Commissioner Kraske, was that? I'm just terrible at the lights tonight. Yeah.
I'd be in agreement with the motion to continue.
Well, I'd actually like to ask staff whether or not they have any thoughts or reflections on sort of the direction it looks like we're going, and if so, assuming I don't hear anything extraordinarily vociferous, I'd be inclined to make a motion to continue.
Yes, I feel like we have the direction that we need, and given that we won't know exactly how long the consultants will take to update the TIA, we would renotice this, so continue to a date unspecified.
That's my motion.
All right, do we have a second? Commissioner Clifford, got multiple
I'll second
seconds.
that motion.
Okay, this is for a motion to continue this item. We've had a motion and a second, please vote. And that passes unanimously. Okay, onward. The next up on the agenda are some consideration items. First one is the annual report to City Council for calendar year 2018. Recommended CEQA action is not applicable. Staff report, please.
Sorry, Chair and Commissioners. Every year, the City Council requires that committees and commissions provide an annual report of the work that they've completed in the last calendar year. And so what staff has prepared is a summary of the commission's report. It's in the same format as previous annual reports. It provides an activity report, a summary of significant items heard by the commission. It provides some data on building permits, projects in the pipeline, and some of our transparency and community participation initiatives in 2018. And so if the commission finds the report acceptable, we can prepare that to submit to the City Council. Staff will also provide some support to the chair and put this information into a PowerPoint. The council is tentatively scheduled to hear all annual reports on May 13th, and the meeting will start early at 5:30.
Thank you.
That is my report.
That is your report. Thank you. All right. Let's see. Oh, did you have a question regarding that, or?
Oh, does this require a motion to approve the annual report, or is it just?
Just some staff direction is fine if you all agree with it.
I agree with it.
Council?
Just wanted to clarify that we're going to go to public comment on this item.
Oh, we are.
It's an item on the agenda. So.
Of course we are. All right. Well, if anyone would like to open this up, would anyone like to comment on this item? Looks like we've already had questions for staff available. Well, maybe not. Let's see. Actually, we do questions for staff. All right.
Just a comment. I think the report is in good form. I think we ought to just move forward, subject to public comment.
Okay. Commissioner Clifford?
The same.
Okay.
I find the report to be just fine.
Great, as do I. Anyone else? Thumbs up. Okay. Anyone wishing to speak on this topic would have 3 minutes. They just bring up a card to staff. I don't see anyone wishing to speak on this, so I'm going to close public comment. And
we have our direction.
You have your direction. Okay. Onward. Next consideration item, annual reorganization of the Planning Commission to elect a chair, a new chair, and a new vice chair. Well, that can come too soon. So, the way we do this is we open this up for a motion for chair. Right. Well, I'm going to, let's see, wait, we've got some discussion here.
Public comment on this?
There's no public comment on this, though.
It's an item on the agenda, so I would recommend you have some public comment on it.
Oh, okay.
Let's make it available.
Well, actually, staff report, I guess, please.
Usually this is on autopilot for
I know,
the commission.
I know.
So the recommendation is to elect a chair and vice chair, and you have it, you can either take them all in one motion or vote on them separately if you'd like.
Thank you. Let's see, questions for staff. Commissioner Bigstick.
Sure. So I know that when I watch council do it, usually whoever's vice chair is the one nominated for chair, and I've been watching Tom Clifford for a number of years, so if that's how Planning Commission usually does it when it's time to make the motion, I'd very much like to be able to make that motion on behalf of Tom Clifford.
Excellent. I would second it.
Was that your motion?
I think we're still discussing first, but
we'd have to go up to public comment. So if anyone wishes to speak on this issue, please fill out a card. They're in the back. You'd have 3 minutes to speak. I don't see any motion here for that happening, so I'm going to close public comment, bring it back to the commission for deliberation. I'll entertain motions.
Sure. So if we're not doing them together, then I'd like to make a motion that we appoint Tom Clifford as the chair to the Planning Commission.
Excellent. I would second it. I'll second it. So we've had a motion and second. Please vote.
And I'm going to abstain.
All right, that passes with one abstention. So second up would be vice chair, and we usually go in the course of seniority on this one. And if I have it correct, I believe John Neblin would be the new VEP. So I will open this up. Commissioner Bigstick.
I'd also very much like to make that motion, if I could, to appoint John Neblin as the vice chair.
Commissioner Clifford.
Well, I was hoping, I know that John has served not too long ago, and I was hoping to open it up to one of the more recent commissioners, which my recommendation would be Commissioner Rubenstein.
All right.
I would be
Sure,
fine with
one.
seconding that motion. If we could, and I really do appreciate the nomination, but if you were inclined to withdraw it, I'd go ahead and second Commissioner Clifford's nomination of our Commissioner Rubenstein.
All right. I did have a light for Commissioner Rubenstein.
I was going to second the nomination for you, so.
That's fine. Why don't we go ahead and spread the wealth?
All right. And then I had one more light for Commissioner Bigstick.
With the understanding that I come into the room with already a great deal of respect for Commissioner Neblin from past experience, I'll be happy to withdraw the nomination on his recommendation.
Thank you.
Okay. I've got a blank slate. Commissioner Clifford.
I just want to be clear that I am nominating Commissioner Rubenstein.
All right. We've had a motion.
And that's and I'll second that.
Okay. Looks like we've got multiple seconds. Okay. We've had a motion and a second. Please vote. And that passes unanimously. All right. Congratulations, Commissioner Rubenstein. Let's see. Communications. Commission communications. Anything? All right. I would like, since I missed the last meeting, I would like to say thank you to Commissioner Gordon. I watched the last meeting, and I do appreciate the motion, I'm not sure what it was, a motion to get him up here so we can give him his just rewards, so to speak. So I hope that happens soon, and I hope we do that, because he served, I think, 11 years on the commission, something, maybe 12 years, yeah. So that's a really good length of service. Staff communications.
Nothing except to say that we have a new permit tech who started, and so we now have 2 permit techs, and so this position filled Tina Gibbs' position. Her name is Amory Sandoval. And so whereas they don't typically come to planning commission meetings, if you call in or stop by the office, you'll be seeing a new face there.
All right. Okay. Well, we're at the end of the night. My last vote. Let's see. Commissioner Neblin.
I move that we adjourn.
Commissioner Clifford.
I second that motion.
All right. We've had a motion. Second, please vote. And that passes unanimously. All right.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.